Okay. I'm aiming for about 6 at the latest, so kind of depends on how much stuff we want to go through.
Yeah.
All right, so I am just, I always like to give a little disclaimer, just in essence of trying to reduce the amount of duplicate meetings we need to have. I do record these, so if ever you're ever not able to make these, we're recording right now on YouTube, so I also like to let you know, just like I think it's fair to know that if you ask questions, stuff like that, it will be recorded, or say something about a teacher or something like that, just so you know. I'm also trying Facebook Live for some reason, just seeing what I like better. But I just want to let you guys know I will go through quite most of this stuff, but if you guys have questions, we're a pretty smaller size group, so it is perfectly fine and acceptable to ask questions. And so my goal for today or this evening is really to kind of go through a few things. The junior year is a big year, as I'm sure you're aware. There's a lot of different stuff that goes on, and it really starts picking up a little bit later in the year, usually kind of around the holidays between like Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that's kind of a big time frame when a lot of the things start actively happening apart from, say, school. There are a few things that'll happen, say, for example, in October, like the PSAT, but we'll go over a little bit more detail in that. And then also what we're going to be doing is kind of spending a little time getting you guys ready, also kind of just mentally prepared for that senior year. We're not going to actively do a whole lot in that senior year, kind of going over the nitty-gritty details quite yet, but I will take us through kind of a big picture look at what happens in a typical senior year for students. The vast majority of our students do attend college either at the 2-year or 4-year world, so we do spend some time covering those two components pretty in depth. We also have students that go off and work. A few students will pursue, for example, trade schools. We don't necessarily hold parent info nights on those particular things, but if your child is feeling like that's the direction they want to go, please let me know and we can sit down and talk specifically about some of those details as well, because they're a little bit different in terms of the paths and processes that students get there. So see if this thing will work or not. There we go. So we'll talk about details, a few things that I'll just review from an email you probably got from me earlier this week or last week with some upcoming dates and details you guys will need to know. We'll also just give a quick reminder about community service, because this is when it usually starts to come around that people start panicking. Like, oh shoot, I do want to graduate. I need those 30 hours, so I want to give your students at least 2 years to accumulate those if they're having trouble. So it's just a quick reminder of what that is. The 1 to 2, we'll just again review that piece, but it becomes extra important in this junior year. Typically academics, as well as outside influences, good or bad, tend to really pick up in junior year as well. Most students start taking 1 or more, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 AP courses or advanced placement courses in their junior year, or pick up a job, get a driver's license, have a car, have other people who have cars. Like, there's a number of influences that come into play when students are especially entering junior year, that tend to pull them in many different directions. So we'll talk about the kind of idea of that 1 to 2, so that you guys can really not enforce it, that's not the right word, but reinforce the idea at home, because that's really where it matters. They're going to be sitting with us for 6.5 hours a day, and then we send them home and ask them to do more. And I realize at least, I don't get to make the rules. I realize that's a lot. Students have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of responsibilities, but to help them be prepared and manage their schedules, having a routine is really, really important at home, and especially as their academics start to take it to the next level in this next 2 years. I printed out a giant transcript today. I think it's kind of cool. I've never had something that big, so I'm going to go through a little bit of reading. How do you read a transcript? What's on it? This is also an important year for understanding what's on a transcript. Some of you guys might have gone through it or have older kids, and we've done that before. This is kind of the first year as well that we haven't done ILPs or individual learning plans in 10th grade. We used to do it before I was the only school counselor. We do it at 10th and 11th grade. Now we do it at 9th, 11th, and 12th. So we do skip a year in 10th grade, somewhat on purpose. 10th grade is relatively low key in terms of everything. It's not low key for you guys, I realize that, but in terms of the rest of the other years, there's not as much stuff going on that like has to get done. It's pretty it kind of goes at its own flow for the most part. Junior year, 9th grade year, everyone's crazy. Like no one knows what's going on really. 10th grade year, it's kind of a continuation of that. The students get a little bit older, but their courses, for example, kind of flow into a sequence. 11th and 12th grade year, however, start to really become a little bit more influential because of a lot of the other pieces that are going to be connecting to some key decisions that they're going to make regarding after high school prospects. Okay, I'll go over again a brief overview of the college search process. And typically when we talk about that, it's generally four-year college, but it could also be trade schools or two-year colleges as well. And I'll actually pull up Naviance for you guys. We'll spend a few minutes actually showing you guys, so you guys know you guys can use the same tool that they do, but also so that you can help your students be able to start. And really that is a super important piece. If you haven't yet, I highly encourage you guys starting to let go of the reins. It's really, really difficult. And as a parent of a 2-year-old, I get it already. Like it's difficult to let them make their own decisions sometimes because no, you can't have 5 applesauces. That's not a good idea. You're going to be up all night. So I understand to a certain level, but I also recognize that I don't understand fully. I don't have a high schooler. I have a bunch of ones that don't go home with me and don't belong to me. But you know, I don't realize what it's like at home. So I want you guys to know that I empathize, but I don't necessarily get it 100%. So if I ever ask you guys something or you feel like you don't really understand what you're talking about, I appreciate you guys telling me, like, because it helps me get better at my job. We'll talk about a little about testing. Okay, so you'll see it pop up here in a couple of the dates, but we'll go over a few of the specifics about what tests are important. Again, primarily for post-secondary options, including four-year colleges where most of these tests happen. Okay, and if I forget, remind me to touch up on AP exams too. I'll mention those briefly. If I forget, it's not in here, but it's an important thing I get questions on a lot about. And as we get into junior year, it becomes a little bit more important. Then I'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. Okay, but again, feel free, if something comes up that's relevant, feel free to let me know. So I do want to show you guys and make sure you guys know how to find, there's a lot of information on the website. I've spent some time and I continue to spend time maintaining our school counseling website for all grades 9 through 12. And so I want to make sure you guys know where to find it because about a year or two ago, it all got reconfigured and everything got buried. So if you ever need to book an appointment, find some information that I might mention tonight, I try to go paperless as much as possible just because, you know, we live in Tahoe, we should kind of respect some of that stuff. I did bring a few things that I already had printed out. I think one of them is a junior college kind of packet, and one of them is our kind of vision and mission. But I also have a, similar to that one, I have a four-year college packet that's probably 50 or 60 pages that I've kind of pieced together from different pieces, different resources and some of my own stuff that if you wanted to download or print it, I invite you to do it. It's all available and I'll show you where to find it. But underneath programs, there's a school counseling link. All you gotta do is click it. And I'm actually going to switch over there. This is what it looks like when you get there. You might see a different picture. It's okay, it's not broken. So if you ever need to book an appointment, just a reminder, it's right there. Pretty simple. You can do that also with myself or Ms. Dolberg if you have a younger child as well. And then there's a lot of details on this front page here. However, if you scroll down, you can get some information, some links to this YouTube. So again, this is being recorded. So if you ever missed it, there will be that there. So you can always click on it and it should be pretty easily accessible. The other piece is at the very, very bottom, I probably should move it up actually, is our calendar. Okay, so I do have a calendar. I try to keep this updated as much as possible. And so, for example, you can see 5 p.m. 11th grade parent night. Student night too, but really parents are the only ones that really come. And so you can see some other information about, for example, an ad drop deadline. That's next Friday. It's pretty quick. Okay, so if you ever want to see some upcoming dates, it's not split out by grade level. Okay, so there's not a grade level calendar, but you can see some, if you want to know what's going on in October, just head down there. A few other areas that I'll mention are going to be, if you ever want to find something real quick, it's usually the top ones are right there. School profile. If you want to learn a little about our ILP meeting process, Naviance link for students or parents, okay? And then a couple of things that we'll talk about tonight fall underneath this one. So this is an area, this counseling support menu item has some links to some of those resources I mentioned, PDFs, helpful websites in the different areas from academic planning. So if you're interested in learning about, for example, NCAA college-bound students. Usually for students, it's pretty simple if they take classes here. The big deal becomes if you take classes online. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about the process, NCAA also does start in junior year. Okay, so there's a process your student does have to go through to become NCAA eligible, typically at the D2, D1 level. Okay, so if you have any questions, we can go over that in specific individually. We also have, in addition, some college and career stuff. So you can find some information. For example, there's some handbooks. Those are the things I mentioned, 50, 60-page pieces. I haven't updated the app map, so it's a map with all of our student applications. If you're ever curious, I have a printout outside my office door. I didn't print a whole bunch of them, but it lists all the schools where students applied, where they were accepted, and where they're attending for several years back. So it's just kind of interesting. A couple of students were walking by and they're like, oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that. Like, did you know that we had 15 students be accepted to San Diego State last year? That's like probably almost half of our class. Because we graduated only about 66, I think, students last year. We got a little bit over 100 this year in the senior class. So we do have a much larger school this year, which is exciting. Comes with its own challenges though at times. Okay, so that's the website. Let me hop back over here. Looks like that kind of. The other piece is another piece I emailed you about, but I think it's going to be super important and it's going to be really, really cool for you guys this year, is we're having a college admissions case study. We've had it the last 2 years. This will be our third one. It's free and it's open to anybody at our school, Truckee High School, Sugar Bowl Academy, or T. Okay, so I partner with Karen Rao and Katie Watts, who are the college counselors at those two schools. And we put this on. We have 8 schools coming. So that's going to be on Saturday, October 27th from 2:30 to 5 here at the school. It does require registration. So if you're interested in coming, you need to register every single student or every single parent or student that's coming. It's only open to 9th graders. If you have younger students, please have them wait. We're anticipating kind of filling up. So we do have a cap on that. Pomona College, UC Davis, St. Lawrence, University of Chicago, a whole bunch of schools coming out. So it's pretty cool. It's a good broad spectrum as well. And you actually will go through the application process itself. You guys will read the application, come together as a group of students and parents with that admissions officer.
There's nobody?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so should I go back to my office or you want me to see
Sure.
the whole?
No, you're good.
Okay, all right. Sorry, guys.
And so ultimately that's going to be a pretty cool event. So make sure you register for that sooner rather than later so you don't miss out. Registration is on that website as well. It's a Eventbrite registration page, and you got it in the email too. I think the final reminder is community service. Like I said earlier, the junior year tends to be, for some people, not till May of senior year, but hopefully junior year people start to get a little bit, yeah, community service. I need that to graduate if they haven't got it done. So just make sure that they have completed the 30 hours. Is a big one because they need that for graduation. That's district board policy. It's just like failing English. If you don't have that done, you don't get a diploma. Okay, so that's the overall hour requirement. You also have yearly requirements tied to your pathways grades. So that's the other piece. And so you can do the 30 hours. Many of your students might already be technically done with their total 30-hour requirement. But if they want to pass pathways, they must continue to do community service. Okay, so that's just one big thing. And it must be volunteer. Okay, so it can't miss school to do it. They can't get paid to do it, whether that's paid monetarily or someone else is being paid for their service, even if they're doing it for free. They can't go rake someone's lawn as part of like a landscaping business and just not get paid for it. That's not community service. Okay. 1 to 2, have your students study 1 to 2 hours a night. Make it a habit. Okay, it's just really, really good habit, even if they don't need to right now. Okay, and I say that from my own experience. I was one of those students in high school that I didn't need to study in high school as much as maybe I needed to in college. And it came back to bite me. I got kicked out of college, my first aerospace engineering experience, because I did not practice this in high school. Didn't need to, so I didn't have the discipline needed. I went on to change my major completely. Turns out math and science was not my thing, that working with people is. I ended up getting a 4.0 in case you're worried, but did not fail out of my other schooling. Okay. So most students study about 19 minutes per night on average. Okay, that means a few above that, a few below that. That's like if you have 6 classes, that's less than like 4 minutes a night for each class. It's pretty low. Okay, so it is something pretty important. And when your student comes home and tells you, Mom, Dad, Aunt, Uncle, Grandma, whoever, I don't have any homework. Say, great, but I bet you can do something else academic that's good use of your time. That might be college research. It might be reading a book. It might be working ahead on a project, doing some volunteer hours, doing some research in colleges. All those things are wonderful 1 to 2 activities. So let's talk briefly about some transcript stuff. Okay, and I realize that's really small. This is a little bit bigger, but might still be kind of small. So I'm gonna try to use this, and hopefully you can see most of it. If not, you can take a look. So transcripts are basically probably one of the most important pieces, apart from the learning, that your students leave high school with. Okay, your transcript is the proof that you completed high school. Technically, your diploma is great, but you can show your diploma to a college, and they'd be like, "Cool, show me your transcript." Okay, because that's really what they want to know. Okay, and so ultimately, what it is, it's a bunch of information about you and your student up here at the top. The real important stuff is what falls in the middle. Okay, so every term that your student's in school, they're going to be getting some information and taking classes. Okay, each class is listed here. You can access all of the same stuff on Aries as a student or as a parent. When you print it, sometimes it looks a little different, but all the same information is there. Okay. So there's a couple different columns in each of these little gray areas is a new semester. Some of you guys might have different schools. You might have attended a different school, took classes at Coldstream or Sierra College. Okay, those will actually show up underneath a different section, so don't be surprised there. These numbers don't mean anything, ignore them. Okay, these little letters and icons, there's a key down here right above where the GPAs are that kind of tell you what some of those things are. Okay, so if you're ever curious, one good thing is as you're a student or you are starting to look into, for example, the CSU or UC schools, those schools only look at academic courses that fall underneath those course subject areas. Okay, so when you're doing that, what that's going to do is you can actually go down here and using the star, just throw out the non-academic components. Okay, that's also where when we get down to GPA, the academic GPA does exactly the same thing. So those stars next to these courses, for example, PE is not an academic course. PE is a college preparatory course. You'll see the vast majority of our courses are considered college prep. A is advanced placement, meaning it earns a weighted GPA credit. If you look at honors courses, for example, you will not see honors with an A next to it. Okay, it'll just be PA. Honors are not weighted at our school. Okay, so that kind of goes through. You'll see the grades. When we're calculating and talking about GPA down here in a second, just note that the pluses and minuses are not included. Okay, you get a straight number, not with plus or minus. There's not 3/4 of a GPA point. And then finally, you have credits. You graduate, your students graduate based on credit work. Okay, so they will earn credits by passing specific courses. They don't get credits just by showing up. So like if you're curious, like, okay, well, this happens to be one of our great students in the past, so they earned all their credits. But sometimes people don't pass pathways. It happens. Not the end of the world, FYI. It's not going to ruin your students' college chances or should, you can give them a little bit of a hard time, but don't stress too much as a parent about that. Like most likely they just didn't turn in their community service. You'll see they attempted, they would get a no pass, or the only class that doesn't earn credits at high school is an F. Okay, they'd get 5 credits attempted, 0 credits completed. Anything other than a no pass or an F, withdrawal or incomplete kind of fall in there too. Those are very rare. We'll end up with 0 credits on the completed side. Okay, all those credits, the computer Aries kind of puts all those bad boys together, and down here is the high school graduation credit center. Okay, and that's an important piece. Your students, probably the next 2 weeks or so, will be looking through their transcripts, and they will be charting where they're at against both high school and college requirements. Right? So when they're doing that, they're going to be looking down here and seeing, okay, what's required left. What they'll probably come home and tell you, especially towards course requests next year, is, hey, especially if they're like go-getter students, they're like, hey, I only need English and GovEcon. Sweet. I can take 2 classes and be done. That's not the case, okay? So their credit requirements, most students that are pursuing college after high school are going to have greater than 220 total credits, which is the requirement for graduation, okay? They do fall in different subject areas, so it's not just 220 whatever credits. They have to be English or math, but that's the total amount required. So they'll see over here 10 credits of English and 10 credits of government economics. Okay, most students that are pursuing college will go well above and beyond that. It's not uncommon to see 240 to 260, if not more. Okay, for students who are in those San Diego State, looking at some of those more rigorous schools that might be on their list potentially. Okay, so just know that going into it. Another thing that I get common questions about, if you look out on Aries, there's a graduation status report. Just know that it will not list anything other than current work. Okay, so you might see some wonky numbers. If you have any questions about transcripts or where they're at, you can always contact me. Another one is this Algebra One Requirement. Don't ask me why that's on there. I think it's a way, way old thing that used to stick around, but sometimes parents or more likely students freak out because it'll say potentially Algebra One Requirement not met. Doesn't matter. Okay, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay. Up here we have the GPAs. We actually report 6 different ones. Okay, 6 different GPAs. And some people are like, why the heck do you need 6 different GPAs? They each kind of tell us something a little bit different. Okay, and more importantly, they tell employers or colleges something different too. Okay, and so there's three rows and 2 columns. The left column is all weighted. Okay, so that's going to be an uncapped weighted GPA. Uncapped is an important word that we'll get to when we talk about A through G requirements in a second. Non-weighted basically throws out all those bonus points for A through AP courses, or call it UC transferable college courses. It's just like getting an A in any other class. Okay, highest GPA anybody can get in the non-weighted category is a 4.0. It'll never be above a 4.0. Okay, so this weighted one can go above that. Okay. I would say probably most people, if they're getting straight A's, taking as many difficult classes as they can, it would probably be maxing around kind of a 4.4 on average. Okay, because not every course they can take is an AP course. The top one is academic. Again, we're throwing out those asterisk ones, PE, things like that. Okay, so that's not included. So that A that you earned in PE does not count in this one. Okay. The first one also says 9 through 12. It's including all of your grades. So this student earned a 4.3556 as a graduating senior in all of their classes. The second one down is the academic GPA, but it throws out the 9th grade. The reason why we have this one is because that is how the CSU, California State University system, and the UC system actually use the GPA. So people are, again, students most likely are like, sweet, my 9th grade doesn't matter. Not the case, but it doesn't matter for the GPA. Okay, so they're still meeting requirements. The grades still count. Okay, if they had a less positive year, it can help in terms of their GPA being higher for A through G, which is helpful, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's what that one is. Same thing with the columns. Okay, same classes, no PE, things like that. The last one is the total overall. Every class, every grade of A through F included. Okay, pass, no pass is not included in there. They don't have GPA points. Down below that, you have credits attempted completed. Usually, if you're passing classes, they're equal. Okay, this student, like I said, had 263 credits when they graduated. Okay, so that's not uncommon. This student also went to UC Berkeley, so just so you know. So I blacked out a couple things that are like identification information that you guys don't need to know. I also blacked out, this used to be, you will not see this, but it was here. There used to be ranking information there. We no longer rank students. We haven't for the last year, I believe, year and a half, 2 years maybe. And so we got rid of ranking. It basically creates an unfair comparison between people that really doesn't account for anything they have typically control over. So we also got a lot of feedback from schools. A lot of these schools that are coming every single year to our case study, and many, many others around the country about this process. And by and far, the vast majority of high schools are going to an unranked system because it creates another cut point that colleges can use. When really, you could have a student potentially, I believe on this ranking, the student was not even in the top 5 of their class because of a lot of different things that come into play. Okay? So that's kind of the big pieces. All the stuff down here doesn't have any super great information that you guys need to know about it either. Okay, that's your transcript at a glance. Okay, when your student has it, I will ask them, they'll probably do it in their pathways class, which is an important class, especially starting this year. Okay, 9th, 10th grade, it's a great class, a lot of good information for them, but in 10th or 11th to 12th grade, the pathways classes and the curriculum really does jump up, and it's super important for them. Okay, so if your student's like bailing on pathways, they're missing a lot of really good stuff. Okay. So they will likely go through this in the next couple of weeks in their pathways classes. Okay, so I will ask the pathways teachers to ask the students to bring the copy home for you guys. Do yourself a favor, just look at it, just see what theirs looks like. Get an understanding. You don't have to know it backwards and forwards, but just know kind of what it looks like on their side. Okay, because it'll be informative when they come talking to you about wanting to go to X, Y, or Z school or doing this, that, or the other thing. Okay. Any questions on the transcript stuff? a lot of information. I apologize. I realize that these nights are like I'm verbally vomiting information at you, and it's important stuff, and I wish I could do it in a better fashion, but we're going to try our best. So there's primarily a few options that most students pursue after high school. Okay, like I said, we're going to be talking, a lot of the conversation starting 11th grade starts looking much more closely at what happens when students graduate. Okay, we're typically over that kind of middle point. We're kind of on the downward slide to a certain level with high school. So we're starting to look at what comes next. Like I said, the vast majority of our students here at North Tahoe High School every year, typically between 60 and 70%, if not higher, will either enroll in a four-year college or a junior college. Okay, so those are the two primary options we tend to spend a lot of time on, primarily because that is where students are ending up. Okay, so it's not because any of these other options are less, worse, they're just different. And we don't have as many, and we do try to spend as much time as we can, but it's usually not, again, in a large format. There's typically in the four-year college world, we have four primary options that students look at. The UC system, different 9 UCs, CSUs, the 23 CSUs, okay? The private schools, the thousands of private schools all around the country, and then out-of-state public schools. Okay, so that'd be your University of Montana, or Montana State, things like that, okay? All of those are great options. Again, the vast majority of our students tend, and rightfully so, typically look in-state for a good portion of their schools. When you're looking in-state, you're going to save a lot of money. Okay, we're not talking financial aid in depth tonight. We'll save that for another time. Most of the time, things change pretty drastically between now and when you guys are doing it. If you wanted to, I'm just throwing this out there for you guys. If you guys wanted to, if you guys wanted to come and kind of just get an eye open, kind of see what's going on. Every year I do a senior financial aid night. This year it'll be October 2nd, I believe. It's again on that calendar I showed you guys. You probably won't get any emails or anything like that about it because it's designed for seniors. But if you guys want to kind of just get an idea of what it looks like, feel free to stop in. I usually also record it so you can also watch it. Junior colleges are wonderful options. I took classes at junior college. I know a number of students and many of my coworkers have taken classes, if not completed entire degrees at junior colleges throughout their educational careers. And I think sometimes there's somewhat of a negative idea that it's a lesser school. That's completely not true. I can say most of my classes, some of my best classes that I took that I learned the most in were actually at a junior college, not at a four-year college. And that goes a long way because that's the stuff that you want to remember. You don't necessarily, I don't care necessarily who my teacher is or what their credentials are per se. It's what I'm going to be able to do with it. Okay. Typically, junior college, two-year colleges, community colleges, all the same thing. They usually cost less, but it's very much dependent. So four-year college will typically be the most expensive option in most circumstances, but it's not always the case. Okay, we're not going to break down all the math tonight, but for some families, especially if you're in a low-income bracket, they usually end up being not as far off as people would think. People in kind of the middle class or upper class kind of income levels tends to be, it does tend to be a little bit cheaper, but it comes with a few trade-offs. The few negatives about junior college that could be said are that it's a non-competitive environment. Students do not have to apply to get in. Okay, so all they have to do is complete high school and they can go in. So it's a great way to actually give your senior in 2 years basically kind of a, we're going somewhere. Doesn't matter where, we're going somewhere. Okay? It takes a little bit of the pressure off that senior year process. Can't make seniors apply, but if I ruled the world, every single senior, doesn't matter if they're going to Harvard or wherever, would apply to a junior college just to have an option and see what that process looks like. Again, I don't get to make the rules, but you can as parents. So that's a great option. Trade and vocational schools would be like University Technical Institute, Culinary Institute of America, Fashion Institute of Design, things like that are very, very focused on preparing you for a particular trade or vocation. Going straight to a job, or there's a smattering of others going into the military for service, Peace Corps. Gap years are something that sometimes students really, really want to pursue. When they do a little bit more detailed research, they usually don't because of a number of different factors, but it can be a really good opportunity if they use it well. My 2 cents on that is if your student is considering a gap year, have them really spend some research on it. It's not a, I just want to take a gap year so I can like backpack Europe. Usually not. It could be very fun, but usually in terms of if their goal is to come back and like return to some sort of school after that gap year, sometimes it's not the best use of their time because typically they won't be able to defer and they have to apply. Okay, so just make sure that they've really done their research and asked a lot of questions about gap years if that's interesting. Okay, sometimes studying abroad can be an option, but there should be some sort of kind of like tangible benefit other than kind of the enjoyment aspect of that year so that they can take that with them to wherever they're going to end up. It's a comprehensive review. I might have done this. I need to change up my analogy, but it's a good analogy. So we're talking again a little bit into the fall of senior year. So once your students are here next year, what they will be looking at in terms of kind of typically four-year college worlds. A lot of people think that this is how we look at students, colleges look at students. And if you come to the case study, you'll quickly learn that it's much more complex than a few numbers and a test score, okay, in most circumstances. So when people look at this tree and try to describe it, they can't really look and see a whole lot of details unless you're an arborist or something like that. They can tell it's brown, maybe it's alive, but not much else. Okay, this is vast minority of how colleges review applicants. Okay, they're going to look much deeper than just the surface level, what classes you took, what grades you got, GPA, and test score. Okay, those are very important. Those are like the roots and the bark and the leaves and stuff like that on the tree. But there's a lot more detail, and they actually look more a little bit like this. Okay, so the CSUs, those 23 CSUs are going to be the closest thing to that picture of bark. Okay, they actually go through what's called an eligibility index process, and it is unfortunately classes you've taken, test scores, and a GPA and some math. Okay, at least at a starting place. Okay, so it is a little bit less personalized, but even UCs, sometimes people are like, oh, UCs do the same thing. They don't. They use upwards of 13 different criteria to actually review them that is set yearly by their academic senate. Okay, so it's a pretty important thing. Some of the things that are included are this. So again, it usually kind of starts typically kind of up here. These are going to be weighted a little bit more heavily. Okay, and then you kind of start working your way down here, down to like even geographic location comes into play. For some students, okay? I would venture to guess that most of this on this side are the things that are gonna like get you in, okay? These are probably not going to get you in. These are things that will typically put you over that edge. Okay, if you're on kind of like the boundary line of like, do we let them in, do we not, are you good for this program? These will become the primaries, these will become kind of like the evidence to back up their decision. Okay, so they do have a sense to play, but it is, your typical special talent of singing, most likely, depending on where you're going, might not get you in right off the bat if your grades are not where they're expected. Okay. So where do we apply? Like I said, about 60 to 70% of students go on to school. We did just this last year with 65 students. We had about a 64% four-year college acceptance rate, which is pretty good. Okay, 6 out of 10. Students. And so if they follow this formula, which you don't have to, it's just a good starting place. That means the vast majority of students probably got into about 4, maybe 5 schools, get denied from 2 to 3. Okay, which getting denied to a school is actually good. Like, don't tell your kids that, but it really is. Build some character, build some resiliency. They need to face some of that. Getting denied to all schools is not fun, okay? But it happens. Okay. Most typically, if we don't follow that's when we get in trouble. When every school is an IB, when every school is a really rigorous UC, that's where students end up getting themselves in trouble in April, March with nowhere to go. Okay, so don't, again, your students driving the boat, but you have some sway and some influence, like try to encourage them to apply broadly and diversely. Okay. The quotes are typical lingo in kind of the college advising world. I don't love them. I think they're a little misleading. Reach school does not necessarily have to mean that it's hard. It just means that it's hard. Maybe it's hard for everybody. That might be a Berkeley for one student. It might be Sacramento State for another. Okay, so it's dependent on your student. But you definitely have to look at some data. And again, I'll show you where to find that in Naviance and a few other places in a minute. So the reach schools are going to be like really, really difficult based on your students' academics, some of this, test scores, things like that. Okay, you can find averages for acceptances, and if like you're, they're in the 70th percentile and they're, 20th percentile acceptance, like that's going to be a pretty tough reach school for someone. Okay, target schools are going to be where they academically or academic to start typically fit. Okay, so they're right in kind of that pretty decent range, close to what an average or kind of like upper average might be. And then safety doesn't necessarily mean like gimme schools. Okay, it doesn't have to be guaranteed, and almost all schools are not guaranteed, even a safety school. Okay, but you typically want your academic profile at least to kind of exceed what their average admissions profile looks like. Those would be someone's probably safety schools. Okay. The important piece here is that every school that you see should be a first choice school. I can't tell you how many conversations that I have with seniors that come to me, or sometimes juniors going into their senior years, come to me with a list of schools that looks pretty good up here. And we get down here and I'm like, you're applying to all these schools and then this school pops up. I'm like, why are you picking this school? And he or she is like, my mom told me to, or like, you told me I need a safety school. I'm like, okay, what happens if you get in only there? Well, I don't want to go there. And why are you applying there? Okay, it makes no sense. Like every school, doesn't matter which one, should be a school that they would be happy to going with if that was the only school they got into. Okay, so that is a very, very important piece because Murphy's Law is real. Things will happen. And every couple of years, that's the circumstance that a student finds themselves in. And usually because they put a few more in this reach category than they should have typically. Okay? And sometimes you just get an unlucky year, to be very honest. Last year, UC Santa Barbara was way, way crazy weird. Like we had more students get into Berkeley than Santa Barbara. So it's every year, different campuses, different schools will come out with very, very different results. Okay, so sometimes you just get kind of like an odd duck year that admissions becomes very challenging for some reason because of the rest of their applicant pool. So once again, junior colleges are not competitive admissions environments, so they do not have to apply. They're enrolling, but they also aren't going to get denied. So it's a great way to kind of pad that list of schools with an automatic, essentially backup plan if that worst case scenario happened, or if that's what they decided to do, it's okay to do that. The junior college world does not need a list of schools. They don't have to have 5 or 7 different schools if that's their plan. They pick one, and they just do the research, and that's the one they go to. Location, program, and size. If you guys as parents are looking to save some money, junior college, like I said, tends to be a little bit cheaper over the 4 years if everything kind of works out according to plan. You will save the most money not having your student go to Santa Barbara. Having them go up here will save you the most money. Because yes, you will save some money in tuition. Tuition is actually fairly inexpensive at even UC and CSU levels after like financial aid and stuff like that, comparatively. Right? Your biggest money that you're going to save is in living expenses. You're going to save, drop of the hat, $10,000 probably minimum each year if the student lives at home with you. I know you don't want to hear that, but especially probably after the next year. But it's serious change that if that's a big deal, that's the best way to save some money. Okay? A lot of programs do have kind of, I should have added quotes. They're usually, most guarantees now are not like written in stone guarantees, it's quote guarantees. We'll guarantee you transfer if you do X, Y, or Z things. That's pretty much the same requirements you did before. So read guarantee with kind of like a grain of salt. But they do have some programs called AA-Ts, which is an associate's degree for transfer. So you complete all of your general education requirements. And typically by doing that in a certain area or concentration, they have some agreements with different CSUs, typically, and occasionally UCs that will kind of grease the admissions wheels as a transfer student. They are crowded. I mentioned that they admit anybody, so that doesn't mean they always give classes to everybody. That's a downside. That will be one thing that really slows things down and actually sometimes can end up making JC cost more than a 4-year college. So you got to get the classes and you got to take 60 transferable units in those first 2 years. If you don't, you're kind of out of luck. You usually cut about even because you're now paying for 3 or 4 years of junior college before another 2 or 3 years of wrapping up that bachelor's program. Okay, it is a wonderful start for many students, primarily, especially if sometimes high school is not the best experience for students. They maybe had a rough start, and maybe they had dreams of going to X, Y, or Z schools, and maybe their academic profile in high school doesn't match that. Okay, right off the bat. Great thing about JCs is it's a fresh start. They clear the slate. You're no longer using this information and test scores. You're now using your performance at the junior college for admissions to transfer programs. Okay, so how do I start? A few must-haves. The process for looking for any school has changed, and kind of the advice has changed in the last couple of years from like strictly looking at numbers, stuff like that, to really focusing on finding what's a good fit. You'll hear the word fit quite a bit, okay? And it's for good reason. We have a lot of students up here in the mountain that really, like I said, we have 15 students that get into San Diego State. A lot of students, for some, I mean, the beach is beautiful, but for some reason up here, it's like an extra cool attraction factor for schools that they really, really want to go to the beach, okay? We've had a number of students that really, really wanted to go to the beach, and very quickly be home, okay? Because what they were doing was they were kind of glamorizing the idea of the beach and not really looking at the full fit factor. What is the campus culture like? How big is it? What's the town it's in? So all those things will impact more so, sometimes even more than the academic factor of it. Okay, so it is a really important piece. Easy to start with items are going to be location, size. If they're looking at sports, you can start looking at schools that have some of those attributes. Prestige is something that we in America tend to get caught up on. We kind of focus on probably the 7% of schools that people know tend to be where people want to go. Okay, but there are, like I said, thousands of opportunities for students, and I would venture to guess that the majority of those are actually better fits than those 7% for many students. But they just haven't really done the research, or they're really caught up on this idea of kind of the Ford, Chevys, Toyotas of the college world. The ones people know when they really should be a Datsun. Okay, but that's the right fit for them. Okay, distance from home is a pretty big one. Okay, sometimes more for parents than students, but you know, on both ends, like you need to go further away. But financial is also a big one, and that's really where you guys, as parents, most of the process you should probably again take a back seat on. Encourage, coach. That's the same position that I have. Okay, we encourage them to coach, but the biggest piece that you guys probably have in the game is that financial piece, because college will cost you money. Okay, it's not free anymore. Okay, and that's on purpose. In some states are going free tuition. We're not going to get into a discussion about that piece, but there is some research that I can't quote that talks about the kind of the skin in the game aspect. Like students should feel like it. I get worried about college becoming a repeat of high school, where kind of like it's a free education, and that skin in the game can actually increase students' performance at times. I'll pull up Naviance, and I want to show you a few ways to actually look up some of this information. For example, location, and then make it really easy to filter those things out. 3,000, 4,000 four-year colleges, like we got a lot of information to process, got to start somewhere. So we usually start with, okay, where is it important you stay in California? So let me pull that up. I have a little demonstration student, if it's still logged in. I'm going to kind of like come over here. Can you guys see through me? Let me turn this down a little bit so you guys can see with that. So at the outside. So when a student or you log into Naviance, you might notice a few things have changed in the last year or so, but the key pieces are going to be right around here for most people. Okay, and your student they probably haven't used this a ton, maybe a few times. Junior, senior year will become a year that they will start using this more, both in their pathways and hopefully on their own if they're doing their jobs. Okay, so if we wanted to search for schools, an easy way is actually just typing in right there. So if you're looking for a specific school and want some information about San Diego State, you can actually just type that into this little box. Makes it really easy. Hit enter, and if everything works, you see it pops up down there. It actually shows you a satellite campus as well. And if you click on it, it should open up a profile page that you can see will have a lot of really detailed information about San Diego State. Okay, so you can see graduation rates, which is important. every year that your student's in school, it adds another $20,000 to $30,000 if you pay full price. So it is a big deal to get through in 4 years. Average net price, you can adjust your income, and it kind of gives you a very, very, very rudimentary rough estimate. You can see acceptance rates. Okay, and I'll show you where you can see, this is national acceptance rates, so like just everybody. I can show you our students' acceptance rates too. And then overlaps of schools. So this is interesting if you're a student has a couple in mind, but like, I don't know where else to apply to. See, this will let you see where a few other students who also had San Diego State also applied. So it's just a nice starting place to like see kind of like, hey, other people like these schools and they like San Diego State too. Okay. Gives you some deadlines, some information, links. And because it's a demo, it might not have all of the details that a full student might have. We'll just click and see. You can see application fees, acceptance rate. So this is where big money is at. Okay, because those big national 35% rates, those are for everybody. That your students are really going to be applying against other North Tahoe high school students. And they are competing against other people for spots, but they're being compared against us. Okay? Because you can't compare even us to Truckee. Different schools, different systems, different grading systems change, stuff like that. So you can actually see, so in 2016, 24 total applicants, 14 students accepted, 2 people enrolled, okay, for whatever reason. So you can go through and kind of see how the applications have come and gone, plus also kind of the average acceptance rate, okay, for those students. So we had a pretty good showing. So only 3 students didn't get in to San Diego State in particular. So that's a pretty good thing. And it gives you a lot of information down here about required classes. So feel free to explore there. There's a lot of information. They usually have like pictures and videos that students like that they can see on campus. But the other piece that's also, the one other piece I'll show you about Naviance, and then we'll move on, is if you go back to that homepage, one of my favorite tools, and typically one of the students' favorite, but also parents' favorite, is what's called the Supermatch College Search. Okay? This is a backward search. So you're going to plug in all the criteria that you need, and it's going to spit out schools. Where we just typed in San Diego State, this is going to show us a different direction. So down here, underneath research colleges, somewhere. They moved it around on me, so I'm having to re-find it. Where are we? There it is. They changed some language on here. So Supermatch College Search, it's underneath Find My Best Fit. And so what this does, they really changed some stuff. Sorry, I'm going to learn this at the same time as you. Summer's when they go through and update a bunch of stuff, and so they must have done that. Let me get through here. This is not the most easy thing to use. Oh my gosh. Okay, so it's going to ask you to select criteria to start. Okay, and so we can select location. It's automatically going to kind of pop that up. So if we wanted to say only in the West, okay, we can X out Alaska's out of the picture or whatever else. But you can do locations. Sometimes they even get nitty gritty down to metro areas. So greater Los Angeles area, New York, things like that. Okay, you do not have to give everything. So if we just want to look at academics and athletics, for example. So if we added a sport, it's going to tell us co-ed, female or male. We'll say female, soccer. And you can say varsity club, doesn't matter. Hit add. Okay. And then somewhere, it's going to show up a list of schools. As you change those criteria, that list is going to update. Okay? And so you can very quickly at a glance see some information, okay, just based on those 2 things. I mean, that's a pretty broad search. I would suggest not going above 5 or 6 criteria at a time. Do 5 or 6 or even less, and then change your criteria a little bit. See what else is out there. If you do them all, you're going to end up with like maybe 1 school, if that. Okay, so the more specific you get, it really narrows it down. But you can see some very, very good things about this fake student doesn't have any GPA or test scores entered, but it gives you some key items here to start with. Okay, so this is a great place to start the process. And then if they wanted to learn more about it, they can simply click on the name of the school and you go straight to that profile page like at San Diego State that I showed you. Okay. The other nice thing that I would really love for them to do that really helps me, but also helps them keep track, is as they find schools that like, hey, I'm not maybe necessarily committed to apply here yet, but it kind of piques my interest. They can click this favorite button, and it's the same thing on that profile page, and it basically adds it to a list. I can pull that list before any meeting I have with them, okay, which is super helpful because, again, I'll look at that list and I'll say, this school doesn't fit any of these other schools on your list. Tell me why you're choosing that this one's interesting. And we can have a conversation about it. Okay, so it's just a really cool thing. There's a ton of other stuff that we don't have time to go into right now. If you have questions, parents also can have access. If you guys want access, feel free to shoot me an email. All I have to do is set you up an account. But it's got tons and tons of stuff. We don't use it to its full potential. And I say we, me, you, and students. Okay, it's just a lot of cool stuff. Any questions on that?
Are the JCs on there too?
Yep, there are JCs, trade schools, international schools. I mean, it doesn't say, it used to have a number and it was like 5,000 or 6,000 schools in their database, and they add more every couple months. And that information tends to come straight from the schools on a yearly basis. So it's pretty cool stuff. There's even more ways to do research. So if you guys wanted to, and I'm happy to show you guys, I'll talk about an ILP meeting that we'll have in a couple months, where I can show you a little bit more in depth and also show your students too. So we talked about that. Visiting schools, this is the best year to visit schools in my opinion. They're old enough to understand, kind of look at it with an eye that, hey, I'm almost out of high school. Freshmen are like, yeah, it's a long ways away. Now it's really starting to become fresh and like interesting for them, hopefully. And so taking a visit will be very helpful in that sense. Try to set up a tour if you can, okay, if possible. It's not always possible. It's always better to visit if no tour is available. Even going to the campus helps. But a visit can sometimes kind of like really get some background information on the campus, what programs they have, be able to ask questions and things like that. They usually have an outreach or admissions office there. All right. Any questions? That's kind of like stepping up to senior year in a nutshell. The next part we'll kind of breeze through pretty quick, hopefully. Oh man, really quickly. PSAT. You guys, most of your students took it last year. Pretty much the same thing. The only difference is this is the year that kind of the National Merit Scholarship qualifying test comes into play. They took the exact same test last year. 10th graders don't qualify for this. If they score well, they can potentially qualify for this. Don't get your feelings hurt if you don't. It's probably not going to happen, but who knows? If they do really well on it, they might get a recognition of some type. I don't know that we've ever had any finalists. It's really tough because it's out of your state. So we live in a very large state. And so our chances are very slim compared to, say, Rhode Island or Vermont or something like that. It will be on October 10th. I did send out an incorrect date. I sent out a correction on my email. I was using last year's date, I believe. So it's not October 11th, it's October 10th, which is a Wednesday. It's a minimum day, and it's given here at school. So all 10th graders and 11th graders will be taking it. It will probably happen during the school day in classrooms. Okay, so we are a huge junior and sophomore class, so we will not all fit in the auditorium. It is, again, free. The district will be paying for it. The biggest thing is students don't necessarily need to be like pressured to do super well in it. Look at it as a diagnostic test. Okay, look at it as a true practice. Okay, it's going to identify some strengths and weaknesses, getting them ready to take the SAT, which typically students will start looking in junior year right around December, January, February, those first couple months of the year. That's usually when most students do it. Okay. SAT, we're not going to go over the specifics with this. They do not get a penalty for wrong answers on this or the PSAT. And so that is a big thing to know because in the olden days, they used to take a quarter point off for wrong answers and nothing if you just omitted it. Now they should guess, even if they're running out of time, they have 2 minutes left, blah, 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 all the way. You might get another extra point. Like, do not leave anything blank unless you are definitely going to come back to it. Okay. The maximum score students can get is a 1600. Most of you are aware of that. The lowest score you can get is a 400. You might not be aware of that. Not a 0. You get 400 points for bubbling in your name. But it is very long. They usually happen on Saturdays. Okay, Okay, so definitely the next couple of months, the dates for this year, occasionally dates for upcoming years are usually posted early spring by the College Board. So all that stuff, registration, we register, do everything for PSAT, and that's the last college test that we do. Everything for SAT, ACT will be done at home on their computer. There's the registration and things like that. So they do registration on their own. They can typically register for any test that they would like to take now. They wanted to, if they wanted to register for a June test, if they're concerned about filling up or things like that. But it does close about a month ahead of time. Okay, so if you're looking at, I want to take a March SAT, you need to make sure you're on it by the end of February. And they do fill up. So you might just want to kind of like get a calendaring book out, start putting some of these things on there just so that it doesn't catch up, sneak up on you. People are like, well, how do I get ready for it? They're hard tests. They really are. I probably couldn't do very well in an SAT anymore. Most of us probably couldn't, I feel. They're pretty tough. And this is straight from the College Board themselves. And they don't really have a reason to they had actually probably be best served by saying, oh, you should take all of our courses and publish a bunch of books and stuff like that. And they really come out and they say, the best way to prepare is actually focus in school. The redesign recently in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, 2016 now, I forget. They redesigned it and really made it a lot less trivia and a lot more real life kind of conceptual work that they're already should be doing in a typical 10th, 11th, 12th grade class. Okay, so take challenging coursework, so take rigorous coursework that's going to push their learning. Okay, in addition, doing their homework. The homework is key because that's practice. Your brain learns by doing things over and over again. Okay, that's going to come out on practice in the SAT. You don't have to think as long to recall an equation. It's just going to help in that SAT world, not necessarily in the critical thinking world that most of us live in, but you got to jump through some hoops to kind of get to that point. Practicing and studying for tests and quizzes, and this is one area that I will admit that our students do not do a very good job on, in my opinion. Most people do not. When I ask them, how much did you study for this test? Most people either say, I study, what are you talking about? I'm just going to do it, get a 50%, I'm going to retake it next week. Okay, like that's one approach. But really it's about kind of practicing the skills needed to memorize and kind of commit to memory, long-term memory, information that they'll need. And the biggest way they do that is by practicing and using those 1 to 2 hours. Okay, by going over it multiple times or of a long sensitive or a long span of time frame, that memory starts to actually make kind of that embedded sense in their long-term memory skills. It will change probably by student how that works. It will also change typically by subject what approach might work best for them. But it is something that they should have some sort of study habit. And again, study is not just homework. Homework does help. It does help build those memories, but specifically for exams, because that is something that will come into play here. They'll need to regurgitate information in a very fast fashion on the SAT. Okay, so that's straight from College Board who creates it. SAT or ACT. ACT is the sister test. Okay, there's not really tons and tons. I mean, there's some arguments, but really they're kind of about an equal playing field in terms of which one should I take. For you guys going into junior year, I would highly suggest looking at taking both early on. Okay, sitting for one and comparing their students' experience. They are different. They test kind of similar concepts, but they are different exams. They will test different things in different ways. In addition, the ACT has a science component to it. SAT actually does test science concepts, but in the context of English and math. Okay, so they will see charts and figures and scientific-esque type things, but the ACT actually has a formalized science component that's really like they will balance chemical equations and things like that. So sometimes students who are a little bit more science-minded can sometimes find the ACT to be a little bit more kind of doable for them because of that. The scores are different, 36 maximum on the ACT. They do go down to a 1. So you get 1 point, not 400 for writing your name. But the scores you shouldn't worry about. People are like, well, what if I do better on the ACT? They will compare both. Schools will take both. Okay, there's no reason to pick one or the other apart from the fact that Typically, if you do them early, you might be able to call one out that stands kind of above the other. Then you can focus your time and energy on that one exam versus trying to study and prepare for both. That would be the benefit of picking one or the other. But in terms of college admissions, do whichever one makes sense for your student. Okay? It really doesn't matter. There's a concordance that they put out every single year. You compare a 24 to whatever score on the SAT. Some states do the ACT or SAT as their state assessment. So like some students will only come with certain tests where others come with the other. So there's not really, don't worry too much about that piece. There's an interest inventory on the ACT if your student wants to do that, but kind of actually probably just annoying to them. They just want to get done with the test, not sit there and, what would you like to do when you grow up? You know, I want to be a pilot or things like that. Like that's kind of probably annoying for them. Both include optional essays. Okay, testing tends to be somewhat controversial in the world in general, but in the world of college admissions folks, it's pretty controversial. Most college admissions folks actually hate the SAT and ACT. They don't think it really provides a ton of details, but it's so much a part of the hoops that we've built into the process that there's not really an easy way to get rid of it. They both have optional essays, and it's unfortunate, but my recommendation is there are really only about 24 maybe. I think there's one in addition to the UCs that require the actual essays. Some will use it, but all the UCs will require it, and maybe a handful of other schools. Okay, they are the final folks holding on that's keeping this stupid thing around. Okay, but the sad thing is, it's my advice that if you guys are if your students are taking the SAT, have them sign up for the optional essay every time they take it. Bummer, it's a waste of time in my opinion, but unless you're applying to UCs, then it's a great use of your time because they will be graded on it. But it's kind of a silly thing, but it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Okay, takes about another 50 minutes. They should take them multiple times. Okay, I promise we're almost done if you have to get out of here. They should take them multiple times. One is not enough. Sometimes you're like, one and done, good. A couple different reasons. Number one is, or some people also worry on the other side that, oh, what if I don't do well my first time I take it? Nobody cares. Well, we care, but nobody really will notice. Students tend to improve as they take this, as it also correlates to them getting older and further through school. Okay? Very rarely does a student improve, and then drop off the face of the earth in any test. And they usually just get a little bit better. They might have some fluctuations. They might have woke up sick or had a prom the night before, or things like that. But in general, they kind of improve year to year. So again, they should probably start looking December, January timeframe of this junior year. Most students will need to have those completed typically by about October at the latest of their senior year. Okay, so you have about a year, 9, 10, 11 months to kind of get a few tests in. Okay, 2 to 5. It's a broad range, but 2 to 5 is my recommendation. 2 would be on the very low end. You probably should be rocking that first and second time if that's the case. Or very, very happy with your scores based on the schools you're looking at. 3, I would say 3 to 4 is usually what we see. First time is probably not going to be their best. Tell them not to freak out. Okay, second time it will improve. The third and fourth time, you have enough data that those first 2 or 3 usually happen in the springtime of their junior year. Then you have summer, which is an excellent opportunity for them to do some practice. Okay, so they can use the data from their first couple of tests, study in the summer, and then move into the fall. And if they wanted to take 1 or even potentially 2 more after prepping, they typically can improve their score that way too. Okay. We do have test prep available. So the prep is not going to teach your students any new content. Okay, it's not designed for that. It's going to help them practice, kind of just reinforcing some of the tools and also letting them learn how the test works so that they're not having to learn it as they're taking it. Okay, so they're going to learn like, hey, there's 4 questions. Can I narrow it down real quickly to 2? That immediately improves their odds of even guessing a right answer. We offer free ACT prep through the Naviance program. We used to offer SAT prep through there, but College Board just partnered with Khan Academy, which is a wonderful tool. If your students haven't used it yet, it's great. But they are now the official partner with College Board, and it's all free, 100% online. They're the latest and greatest to get all of their recently released tests and it will self-score tests for you. It's pretty stinking awesome. So we don't provide that, they provide it, but we definitely refer you guys to that. Those are two very accessible, very inexpensive free ways to get some practice and prep work done. The nice thing is also you can do it at your own time. No money involved. They can do it a couple hours here, a couple hours there if they wanted to. Every year we try to plan in-person SAT workshop for typically juniors. We don't have any specific details yet. If and when we have to kind of look for money, we got to look, there's a whole bunch of steps we got to do. Find someone who can make it here on a certain date and time. If we're able to do that, and I'm hoping we do, it'll probably be late in this year or early in the spring next year. And we'll send out some more information about that. Spaces will be limited for that, but most of your juniors should be fine as long as they sign up by kind of the deadline. We covered most of this, so I'm not going to review some of this stuff. The only thing that I will mention here is really keeping track, and this is again where you as parents can help them. Maybe setting up a binder at home, a folder system. Don't do it for them. Just help facilitate that process. Okay, they should be tracking the information that they've gone through high school. They might have missed 2 years, but they can pick it up now. Their experiences become key for things like writing essays, applying for scholarships, and they need to remember it accurately. To have them, if they did something cool over the summer, if they had a wonderful leadership experience, like have them write down some pieces of information about that experience so they can remember it when they're trying to kind of put together an essay in their senior year and not have to just make stuff up off the top of their head. Okay. By the way, these people who are reading these applications and essays, they read tens of thousands of these things. So number one, they're probably not going to read the whole thing. Number two, they're very, very fast at figuring out who's BSing their essay. So it should be super, super like doesn't have to be like, there's a lot of, they'll end up reading a lot of news articles about college essays and thinking their essay has to be like that person who met their boyfriend at Costco and now they're married and so on and so forth. Like, just tell an authentic story about who they are. That's all they need to do. Okay, they don't have to impress. They don't have to cure cancer. They don't have to do all these other things. It's basically the replacement of their interview. Okay, so that they just need to be aware of what they're doing so that they can reflect on themselves and how they've learned, how they've grown through high school. Okay, not every school requires essays, but more and more are. Kind of covered these things. AP exams. The AP exams start to become more important in junior year too because many more people start taking AP classes. Some students are taking, like I said, 3, 4, maybe 5 AP courses. Every year in kind of early springtime, I kind of get asked like, well, how does it matter? In general, a lot of college information is in general. There's always exceptions to the rule, but I would say the vast majority, most AP scores are not used in the college admissions process. They're used in college admissions, but not in the kind of deciding if you get in or not. Okay, it will decide placement once you're in. The college or the AP courses that you have taken are used heavily in the decision of admissions. Okay, so I get the question of, well, I'm taking like 4 or 5 AP classes. I don't really feel like I need to take or want to take all of these AP tests. It's kind of expensive or a lot of time and energy prepping. Like, so you don't necessarily like take as many as you think you need to. Like, if you pass, it's only a benefit. Okay, you could potentially have some college credits waived, which saves some money. Okay, and some time in school. Some schools, most of your IBs, will not even accept AP credits. Okay, so they're snooty and they want to do it their own way. They're going to teach you everything. Okay, but they will want to see all of those courses. Okay, so use your best judgment on those pieces, but just know that they're typically not used in the admissions environment at most schools. Okay. ILPs, I mentioned that, and this is second to last slide. ILPs are individual learning plans. We will start those probably around December. Okay, so probably a little before Thanksgiving, you'll get some information from me, probably in an email, maybe a phone call that says, hey, feel free to set up your ILP appointments with me. And that will be something that your student, again, please don't do it. I want your students to do this. Your student should set up an appointment with me, but they should collaborate with you. That could be hard.
Do we come to the meeting?
Yep. So 9th grade and junior year, the parents are required, heavily encouraged to be there. If for some reason a parent can't make it, and we tried, I'm not gonna like say, nope, we can't talk, like we're not gonna do this. You like try to do it. We have plenty of time to do this. Like try to find a time that you and your student might be free and come in. It's a pretty informative meeting. It takes about 30 or 40 minutes and it's specific to your child. Okay, we're gonna go through some information, talk about classes they wanna take, look at their schedule this year, look at kind of how things are going, talk about what's happening after, like their goals after after high school, and get them thinking about the process too. Okay, so you'll get some information about that, and it'll be booking an appointment through that same website I showed you online. You just find the time that works for you. Okay, and then that's it. Any questions? Anything that you feel like I didn't go over that I should have? Anything you want to know? Maybe there's parents that have seniors that have already gone through that are like, hey, this was helpful to me. What do you guys think? Got anything for me? Yeah.
Other than the ILP, do you have a regular or a schedule of meeting with the kids, or is it more basically them approaching you?
So I will be going through, so individually, I don't have any set schedules. Students can always book appointments with me, and many students do on their own. They just have questions, they want to come ask some questions, and that's great. That's what I love to see them do. But typically no formalized like individual meetings, but I will be in their pathways classes pretty frequently this year. We'll be showing them things like Naviance in a more in-depth fashion, doing some financial literacy work with them. So not necessarily always related to college stuff. There's a few kind of social emotional pieces that we'll be teaching them in pathways. So there's probably 5 or 6 times at least throughout the year that I'll be in their junior pathways classes delivering content to them. And many times that also triggers some questions that they'll say, hey, I want to talk more about that. I didn't understand what you meant by that, but they'll follow up. But your student can always, as can you, book appointments with me. But we kind of do, right now I'm working on all the seniors. So we're going to do these kind of like senior stuff. Kind of takes me through October, most of it. And I do have time if you guys have questions, but it's just, it's easier and it makes more sense for both students and myself to do it in chunks, because then it can be done in a little bit simpler fashion for both of us. But definitely if you guys have questions following or before that are maybe more time sensitive or kind of pressing, feel free to book an appointment. I'm almost always available.
So everything you've gone over tonight, they will hear also.
In different ways, yes. Sometimes in much smaller chunks, sometimes at different times throughout the year. Yeah. So I have your student, I posted a video. So we used to have meetings where I'd get like 30 kids who showed up and brought their coffee to an RTI session in the morning to kind of go over some of this stuff. And it wasn't a very good use of time for any of us. So they woke up early and were mad that they woke up early. I was like, why isn't everybody here? And so I recorded a video and I just posted it and I sent it to them. So if you go home, make sure they log into their Google Classroom. They also got an email with the link, and it's like 10 minutes, like a very, very abbreviated version, a lot of dates, a lot of information, but we will go through chunks of this, not all in one go and not all right away.
Do you have a library or books that people can
take
a look at?
Yeah, so I have a few books in my office. I'm happy to loan them out, or like if you want to, there's a couple that are great. So the Fiske College Guide, F-I-S-K-E, is a wonderful one. I think I probably don't have the latest one. I have maybe a year or two old, but it's probably fairly similar. That's a wonderful resource, similar to like a paper version of that search. Okay? But they go through there at a relatively unbiased program who goes through, and there's probably about 300 or 400 different schools that have pretty detailed profiles that don't just talk about academics, they talk about the professors or the campus or the town and things like that. It's like $20 on Amazon if you wanted to buy it. I also have a copy that you can borrow for a couple of days. I have someone dropped off, I'm not sure how old they are, haven't got that far yet. Someone just recently dropped off some ACT study books. I have a couple extras from the last couple of years of our SAT prep course for study books. If like you or your kids are more like paper, like I'm gonna be on YouTube way too much if I do this online, I have a couple you can probably just have. And then I have a number of other books, college essay writing books, college searches for the artistic person, things like that, that you just want to go browse through my bookcase. I'm happy to let you borrow anything as long as you bring it back. Anything else?
I'm kind of confused about Naviance. Did you say the parents should be logging in? Should we have our own?
You can. You don't. So the one downfall is that we do not collect in the parent kind of registration process, we do not collect all the required information to automatically create parents' accounts. So we automatically create student accounts, they automatically get logged in, stuff like that. Parents can't do that, so I have to be, if you guys want access, it's basically the same access with a few less editing rights so that you can't necessarily apply to colleges for them and like put stuff on their lists and do certain things for them, but you can do vast majority of what they can do. You can like ghost in and kind of do the same research tools and stuff like that. I just shoot me an email saying like, hey, here's a good email, and I can just set you up an account, which might take me a day or two.
I don't know if that's what, we looked at something last year, I don't know if it was Naviance or something
Probably.
else. And it seemed like trying to plug in majors really, it narrowed it kind of too much. And it's like the same thing has a different name in different schools. Yep.
So majors are tough. As much as majors are important, I tend to steer students away from starting there even in their junior year. Like it is important because like, yeah, we don't want to spend a bunch of time researching schools that I have no major that I'm interested in. Like, yeah, get that. But a lot of times students they think they're interested in a major and they're really not. They're interested in a major because it makes a lot of money. Their friend did that. Their mom or dad does that. Like, but I would say teacher, engineer, I haven't seen any history professors. Teachers and engineers tend to be like, and nurses. Those are like the big hitters, okay? I would say 8 out of 10 students don't really know what that means. A lot of different things that means. What kind of engineer? What kind of teacher? Where do you want to be? Do you know what it takes to become a nurse? Like, most of them are like, no. You don't really know that you want that as a major. And sometimes they cut off a lot of the options by starting that process with that in mind, and they ignore the rest of the options that maybe have a similar career path. Maybe you don't want to be a mechanical engineer, maybe you want to be a biomedical engineer. Or I have a buddy, or not a buddy, a friend who has a kid who's in college that is studying art and math, like together. And like, it's a very creative major, but they're applying science to that program and doing things like with like acoustics and stuff like that. So like, there's a lot of different avenues that sometimes focusing so specifically to start with on a major can actually be a detriment to the process. But they should be thinking less about major names, like major big picture majors, more about like, what do I like to do? What am I interested in? What have been my favorite classes? How do I spend my free time? If I had the choice to do X, Y, or Z things, which would I first do? And granted, probably none of them would, if that was the only thing we use, none of them would probably end up in engineering or nursing or any of those things. But it's a better starting place. Creates a better conversation and a better research process than starting with, I want to be a teacher. Because then it pretty much silos only those schools or only those programs that have.
So is there a place to put interests?
Yeah, so on Naviance, so the biggest thing about majors is when you type those things in, usually if you typed in like education, it'll be like educational consultant, educational psychologist, educational counselor. And so like being broad. So like you can enter kind of an interest, and we're entering a couple different interests might be good. But if you just entered educational psychologist, it's going to filter out all of those other things that might have been under education or engineer or things like that. Yeah, so starting broadly and working the way to be more finite is a better approach than starting with one school with one program and then trying to figure out other schools that are very similar. Good questions. Any other questions for the group? Yeah.
My older daughter did, I think in Pathways, they created resumes. Are they going to do that again this year? Okay,
So that's going to be a big component. Actually, tomorrow afternoon, all of the teachers will be kind of pulling all their Pathway stuff together. That's our kind of collaboration time on that. So we'll have some finalized, but that's a big component of junior year. So resumes, things like that. That's also where some of the financial literacy comes in. Our advisory team said they wanted to hear some more about kind of like we'll be talking about how credit works. Like that's a pretty big deal as you start looking at getting credit cards, or how eventually like how car insurance works. Like why is it important? Why is it a law? I mean, so some applicable stuff, but also stuff that applies to resumes. They'll, I think I have scheduled to do mock interviews. So they'll be doing pure mock interviews with each other, as well as some college research and planning pieces as well. So it's a pretty packed year. Some students don't like it because it's so busy. You're doing a lot. So it's actually kind of a class starting this year and next year, versus sometimes 9th, 10th grade is a little bit little bit more relaxed. They're just trying to like, I think, help them stay sane for a couple of years and then kind of shove the work on them a little bit more once they're more capable of it. But it will be good.
Last year, I think you had some kind of SAT prep, or the kids had to commit to certain days and then they would take the test. Some program you had.
Yeah, so we used a company that's going to be that in-person SAT prep course that I mentioned. We used a company called Revolution Prep. We weren't super stoked on them, so we're not going to have them back this year. We've had a group called, or a group man called, works for a company called, owns a company called Sycamore Learning out of Georgia, actually, I believe, who we've used in years prior. We were just trying to see we've used them for a long time, and so we were just trying to get an idea of what else was out there. I think realistically, we probably just got a bad presenter. I don't necessarily think Revolution Prep is bad. They're actually super well respected in the prep world. I think we just got a not great person who didn't know how to work with high school kids. But so we'll probably go back to them most likely to Revolution or to Sycamore. But the only downside, it doesn't come with that pre-test that you probably are thinking of. So there was a pre-test component with Revolution Prep, which not every student did, which kind of created some issues. But there's a ton of stuff in there. You get like a book like that big, and they can take a test all they want on Khan Academy for that pre-test experience type thing. Yeah, so I don't have any specifics yet about dates, times, even if it's happening at this point. But we're hoping. Any other questions? Otherwise, take us dinner time. All right, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. We'll have some more information coming your way. I hate bombarding you with a bunch of stuff, but it's important and timely, so I hope that it's helpful.